I'm Kelly Jennings, CEO of Powerband Solutions. Powerband is a cloud-based provider of auction, inventory, and finance solutions that make buying, selling, and financing vehicles more efficient. Powerband Solutions trades on the TSX Venture Exchange symbol PBX and on the OTCQB symbol PWWPF and on Frankfurt symbol 1ZV. For more information, please visit us at powerbandsolutions.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Danielle Park, editor of the popular blog Juggling Dynamite. She's also president of Venable Park Investment Council Incorporated. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Jim.
The big fuss, U.S. tariffs on Canada, will they really happen, or was that just a bargaining ploy by President Trump?
I think, they're announcing, the U.S. announced more tariffs against China this week and today even. I think this is going to be a theme that's with us certainly through the midterm elections in the U.S. later this year. And it's, there's a lot of playing to the populist vote. There's a lot of, there's even some legitimate things. I mean, I've not been a great fan of globalization for the last few years because it has definitely allowed a hyper concentration of political power and money in a handful of corporations globally and left a lot of deficits behind in many local communities at the city-state level, at the household level. So, I'm not adverse to the idea that they need to massively shake up the powers that be, and I think that that's why Brexit happened. Why that vote came through was that impulse that the populace wanted to have a change, a broadening of the base, so to speak. And I think that Trump had some points, in the G7 meeting in Quebec, he was wanting to have that, sunset clause where things are reevaluated in 5 years, and that was a major sticking point. But I think that it's not a bad thing to have things reevaluated. After all, we're supposed to be in a democracy. We're supposed to have, the people are supposed to be able to have input and vote on these things. And what happens is we get into these really long agreements, and governments come and go, and the agreements still dominate, and there's not an easy way to reevaluate or look at, how it's working. And, every best laid plan may or may not go in the way that people were hoping, and it's always a good idea to have periodic review and make sure that you haven't gone too far off track. So I think there's a lot of grandstanding and a lot of playing to the press and, popular message and all that, but at the same time, I'm certainly in favor of a breakup of some of the status quo and a review and revisit of how many of the policies today, are they helping or hindering? Are they making us better off, or are they making it more difficult for the average family to prosper? Because after all, it's not just about blind consumption or corporate profits. It's supposed to be about, measuring standard of living and improvement. So I think we need to really have different ways to measure and reflect on this stuff. So as much as I'm not a fan of Mr. Trump, I don't think he was all wrong in what he's been doing lately with the trade stuff.
Are we trying to become more local and have more local control instead of having worldwide one state?
Well, it's interesting because lots of ideas or policies can be implemented at a local level, whether it's in a municipality or a city or a state or province. But there's obviously overarching themes that will not really be dealt with best on that level. But wherever possible, I think, again, back to the idea that, the ideology of a democracy, of people having input in the fate of their lives from day to day, of being able to assess whether a given, policy might work in one area but not be serving the needs or best interests of people in another. So, yeah, I think it's, the more we think things are etched in stone and that's just the way it always is always a mistake, I think, because human history and evolution show that nothing is ever static. Everything is a phase, right? Every single part of what we go through is a phase. And this particular one, feels like it's been a lot of negative news, but there's no doubt some breaking apart and positive stuff that's going to come from all this turmoil. And again, that's the way it's always been.
We'll have more with Danielle Park right after the break.
I'm Brian Fowler, president of Blind Creek Resources Limited, listed on the TSX Venture Exchange, ticker symbol BCK. Blind Creek is focused in the Yukon, Northwest Territories, and British Columbia. The company's key property is the Blend Project, one of the largest undeveloped lead zinc silver deposits in Western Canada, plus plans to advance the recently acquired, fully permitted historic engineered gold mine in the Atlan District of Northwestern BC. Check us out at blindcreekresources.com.
Glance Technologies owns and operates Glance Pay, a disruptive mobile payment technology now live in 16 cities in Canada and about to launch in the US. With revenues up 664% in the last quarter, Glance Technologies has the potential to be a worldwide leader in an industry projected to grow to $1.3 trillion in 3 years. Glance Technologies stock symbols are GLNFF in the US and GET in Canada. Find out more at glancepay.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Danielle Park. Going back to local control, California is going to have a referendum in the fall on whether they should be split into 3 states.
There's a lot of stuff going on in California right now. There is, it's a very interesting study of, various perspectives. I mean, they've got the tech sector there. They've got, a big agriculture sector there. They've got some of the greenest policies in the United States, and they've got a water crisis. They've got, it's an amazing compilation. They're something like the world's 13th largest economy. So it is a union of republics after all. At the core, the United States came together as a union of these separate republics, and in many ways, certain areas, and California being one of them, certainly has a lot of its own independent policies and ideas, and probably in a country led by Trump as a figurehead, you're likely to see more breaking off in areas like California, just ideologically, and again on a policy basis, and certainly on an environmental management basis. There's a lot of difference there. So, again, that referendum at a local or state level, that breaking apart of bigger unions, that seems to be a theme that's definitely part of our era, Jim. And I think it's very understandable how we got here, and it's less clear where it goes.
Does blockchain allow to have local votes on everything? I mean, why just have, say, 300 parliamentarians decide the fate of the nation? Why not give the vote to everybody on major issues?
Well, that would be a huge shift in tradition in terms of how we have typically governed. And of course, new technology is going to impact. We just had our, provincial elections here, of course, and for the first time when we went to sign our ballots, it was one of those, machines that instantly told you whether there was a problem with the ballot, and it was automatically fed in and tabulated. So every election that we have is getting new technology, and I think blockchain ledger being, an area that's evolving as we speak. So certainly there's going to be impacts from that, and it's very difficult, truthfully, for any of us to know 5 years from now, never mind 10 years from now. As I was saying not too long ago, just a decade ago, people didn't have smartphones, really. It's only been about 10 years, and now, it's an epidemic, and everybody's obsessed and compulsed and addicted. But 10 years from now, who knows? Who knows if we may have come out of that period of darkness to something more intelligent.
Well, the technology now, you take a picture of a check and it's in your bank account.
Yeah.
And how hackable is that, though? I mean, apparently paper ballots are the best way to vote because they're least hackable.
Yeah, but also they can be, altered, forgery, lost. That's been a classic one, right? Losing ballots over time, stuffing different pieces of paper in. I mean,
sure.
Listen, I don't think there's any system where humans are not going to have opportunity for all sorts of mucking about and fraud and farce, but on the other hand, there's definitely improvements too that we can make as we go along.
We'll have more with Danielle Park right after this.
Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Magnum Gold Corp. Inc., MGI on the TSX Venture Exchange. A 2015 drill program on the LH property intersected high-grade gold, including 16.9 meters of 13.58 grams and 11 meters of 20.66 grams per ton gold. A follow-up drill program is planned to further evaluate previously identified subsurface high-grade gold mineralization. Please visit our website at magnumgoldcorp.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're chatting with Danielle Park. Danielle, do we have some good news on the household debt front?
Yeah, so in Canada, the household debt burden fell in the most recent report from Statistics Canada that came out today. Still back to only by a couple of percentage points, and we're still in pretty lofty company in terms of the amount of debt that the households in Canada are carrying. It's interesting. Someone sent me an excellent chart, which I put on the blog this week, showing that in terms of household debt to GDP, Canada is definitely in a club of the top sort of 6 most grotesque in the world, but we're not the most indebted. Switzerland, Australia, Denmark, the Netherlands, Norway, they're all slightly higher debt to GDP ratios than Canada. But it was the bump up in rates and the weakness in housing markets that slowed the pace at which Canadians were taking on debt in the most recent survey. So that is a good thing, because ultimately, this goes back to that classic book from 1996, The Millionaire Next Door, and all the decades of research that have been done on how one accumulates savings over time and becomes a, quote, millionaire. And the number one way in which it's done is by putting a relatively small amount into one's house and personal consumption items in terms of your income, and always spending less than you earn in order to accumulate savings over time. So if you think about that, this is what I go back to. We've spoke of this several times, is, during the expansion cycle of an economy, when people are getting better wages, more work, longer hours, these are all sort of part of the recovery part. The difficulty is that during that, they are supposed to not ramp up their consumption and borrowing as income with their income, but actually put away some of that income for the rainy day of the downturn that comes, the job loss, or the lower hours worked that ultimately come every cycle. So the way to manage this is to lower your debt and raise your savings while your income is growing and stable. And that's exactly the opposite of what most people have done in the past couple of cycles, and that's why we're so financially fragile, is because we have, before we were at record low unemployment, cyclically the lowest unemployment we've seen in many decades, and yet people have the most debt and the least liquid savings. So those two things do not make for financial stability and strength in the longer run. So what we really need to do is go back to basics and think, yes, we need to stop taking on more debt, stop reaching for insanely valued homes, and guess what? Ultimately, the value and the price of those properties will come down such that people don't have to take on so much debt in order to just get a roof over your head. So it's a positive thing that the debt is coming down. It's only moved the needle a tiny bit. And the problem is that when income falls, as I say, during the weakening part of the economy, which we, are certainly due to enter, and with all the trade protectionism, we're certainly seeing a lot of weakness, for example, in the in the Canadian dollar. The U.S. dollar is, with the tightening of the monetary policy yesterday, strengthened. The ECB saying they're going to keep their rates low until next summer. without trying to increase them. All that's really weakening global currencies, and it's about this trade mess that's going on. So I think Canada's in a weak position. We are the global exporter, of rocks and trees, which are not in high demand going into a slowing global economy, which is indeed what's the state of affairs as we speak. South Korean exports is typically a canary in the coal mine in terms of the global economy, and it's been in a declining phase now over the last year and a half. So that suggests that we're probably going to see a decline in the overall consumption in the economy globally, and that's not going to speak well for Canada. So trickle that back to workers in Canada, businesses in Canada, households in Canada who are undersaved and indebted going into this period. It's likely to be a painful episode. So definitely the way back to health is to work the debt down. Unfortunately, a good deal of it may indeed be written off eventually because people have just taken on so much more than they can feasibly repay within their own lifetime. So I think, going back, getting the debt down, getting the savings built up, getting housing to correct so that people can afford a roof without putting every dime of their income into it. Those are all the way back to a more balanced and healthy household and ultimately economy. So it's just that it's going to take some time here.
Are Canadians more willing now to negotiate, get a consumer program to pay down their debt or write off part of it before they get near bankruptcy?
No, I mean, Scott Barlow's a trustee in bankruptcy that I follow. He writes pretty prolifically in media. You can follow him on Twitter. He talks about the patterns that they're seeing. So in the past few months, he was saying a lot of the customers that were coming in. He's been writing for the past couple of years how so many people, even with really high incomes, and this is the thing again, back to the millionaire next door, people think that if you make a high income, you spend lavishly, you drive fancy new cars, and, everything is rosy. In reality, the statistics suggest that people with higher incomes end up saving a smaller portion of their or retaining a smaller portion of their income over time because of those very things, because of the showy overconsumption and leasing and spending too much instead of putting away for a rainy day. So anyway, he was talking about the fact that a lot of people are coming in, up to their eyeballs in debt, and him saying, clearly you should look at a reorganization here. It's not likely that you're going to be able to pay all this off. And either two responses. One is, wait, I'm just waiting to see if the bank will give me another reorganization loan. So they're realizing the gig's up, but hopefully they're saying hopefully the bank will give me a little bit more credit just to make this go a little bit longer, even though it's a futile attempt because they've got so indebted that it's not going to work out for them. But the other thing that he's seeing is when people finally, give up, so to speak, and say, fine, what do I do? And he explains the process of debt reorganization and getting the creditors to take pennies on the dollar and all that sort of stuff. Many other people say, geez, why doesn't everybody do this? So you get both sides of that, I guess.
Danielle, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Hey, thank you, Jim. My
guest has been Danielle Park, editor of the popular blog Juggling Dynamite. You're listening to HowStreet.com radio. Find us on Twitter at HowStreet. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Questions for the show can be sent to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.